Life aboard a German U-boat during World War II was a grueling test of human endurance, both physically and mentally. Unlike other naval vessels, U-boats offered almost no comfort to their crew. These submarines were built with one primary focus: operational effectiveness. Everything else, including the well-being of the crew, was secondary. Each war patrol could last from a few weeks to several months, and during this entire period, the men aboard were subjected to incredibly harsh conditions. They had no access to basic hygiene. Bathing was not possible, shaving was suspended, and changing clothes was a rare luxury. Most crew members went the entire duration of the patrol in the same outfit they started in, sometimes only changing their undergarments once. The oppressive atmosphere created by the buildup of sweat, body odor, oil, fuel, and stale air added to the already suffocating sense of claustrophobia. The crew itself consisted of a mix of specialists and general seamen. Specialists had specific roles essential to the operation of the submarine, such as operating the radio equipment, maintaining torpedoes, and handling the engines and other mechanical systems. Their expertise was critical in ensuring the submarine remained functional in the harsh environment of underwater warfare. Meanwhile, the general seamen carried out a wide range of duties. These included preparing and loading torpedoes, managing weapons like the deck gun, cleaning and maintaining the living quarters, and performing lookouts or guard duties. Every task was vital, and every crew member had to perform with precision and discipline under constant stress. The work schedule was relentless and designed to keep the submarine running continuously. Seamen operated on a rotation of 3 8-hour shifts, one for sleeping, one for assigned duties, and one for other tasks which might include maintenance, cleaning, or even helping out in the galley. Specialist crews had a slightly different schedule that spread their work across shorter and longer shifts to cover both day and night operations. Fatigue was constant, as the work never truly stopped, and sleep was often interrupted or insufficient. Being on watch was one of the hardest tasks, especially in stormy weather. Positioned atop the conning tower, crew members on watch were directly exposed to the brutal conditions of the North Atlantic. Freezing rain, powerful winds, and crashing waves made it nearly impossible to stay dry or warm. The conning tower would sometimes be completely submerged by waves, making the task even more perilous. Although special foul weather gear was provided, it did little to protect them from the cold and wet. Their clothing would become soaked, and there was almost no opportunity to dry it afterward, which meant many crew members remained wet for extended periods. Safety lines were essential during these watches, as the threat of being washed overboard was constant and very real. Fresh water on board was severely limited, especially since in many cases one of the freshwater tanks was filled with diesel instead to increase the submarine's operational range. This meant that drinking water had to be rationed very strictly, and none could be spared for washing or bathing. Personal hygiene took a back seat to survival. The crew wasn't allowed to wash themselves or do laundry during the patrol. They simply had to endure the buildup of sweat, grime, and salt on their skin. Although they were provided with a special saltwater soap to remove the crusting of seawater and sweat, it was generally disliked because it left behind an unpleasant film. To help with body odor, some deodorant was supplied, but in the oppressive, close-quartered atmosphere of a submarine, it made little difference. Space was a luxury that did not exist on a U-boat. Each man had a single small locker for all his personal belongings, and many slept wherever there was room. The front torpedo room, for example, often served double duty as both storage and sleeping quarters. At the beginning of a mission, several of the bunks in that area had to be folded up to create room for extra torpedoes. These bunks could only be reassembled once the torpedoes had been used and the storage space was cleared. Until then, some crew members simply had to find makeshift places to sleep, such as lying across equipment or on the floor. Even after the bunks became available, there were still not enough for everyone. This led to the practice of hot-bunking, where sleeping arrangements were shared. As soon as one sailor got out of bed, another would climb into the same still warm space. This rotating use of bunks conserved room, but also meant that personal space and comfort were almost non-existent. Sharing a bed, even in shifts, added another layer of physical and psychological strain to life on board. Food, though a necessity, was also a struggle. At the beginning of a patrol, submarines carried a decent variety of provisions, but there was little space to store it all. Food was often stashed wherever it could fit, crammed into corners, stuffed beneath bunks, or hung from pipes. As time went on, fresh food quickly ran out, and the crew had to rely more on canned goods and dry rations. The air inside the submarine became increasingly stale with every passing day, and with no proper ventilation, the mixture of diesel fumes, sweat, unwashed bodies, and rotting food made the atmosphere nauseating and oppressive. Despite all of these challenges, the men were expected to perform their duties with precision. A single mistake could mean disaster for everyone aboard. Living under the constant threat of enemy attacks, mechanical failures, and the sheer pressure of deep-sea diving added a psychological burden that wore heavily on the crew. Noise discipline was essential, especially when the submarine was evading enemy ships or lying silently at the bottom of the sea to avoid detection. Conversations were whispered, and movement was kept to a minimum. The stress of silent running, combined with the physical discomfort and exhaustion, made the psychological toll immense. Despite these overwhelming hardships, U-boat crews continued to carry out their missions with determination. They were driven by duty, camaraderie, and a shared understanding that their work was essential to the war effort. The conditions they endured are a powerful testament to their resilience, discipline, and the extremes of human endurance in wartime. Life aboard a German U-boat during World War II was a relentless test of the human body and spirit, pushing sailors to extremes few outside their ranks could truly understand. Privacy was virtually non-existent. The submarine was a narrow, crowded, constantly moving metal tube beneath the sea. Crew members slept wherever space allowed, often hot-bunking in narrow, hard beds that lined both sides of the tight corridor. When one man got up, another would immediately crawl in, sometimes still warm from the previous occupant's body heat. These bunks were pressed against the walls of a busy walkway, and there was a constant stream of movement as men passed back and forth to perform their duties or navigate the boat. With so many people in such a confined space, there was never a moment of solitude. Conversations were overheard, footsteps were never-ending, and personal space was a forgotten concept. Only the captain was afforded the slightest hint of privacy, and even that was symbolic more than functional. His small cabin was shielded only by a thin curtain, allowing him a small physical separation from the rest of the crew, but doing nothing to block out the noise or commotion that surrounded him. Positioned strategically between the control room and the radio room, the captain's quarters allowed him to respond immediately to emergencies, keeping him close to the heart of the submarine's operations. Even in rest, he remained in the midst of it all, always alert, always listening. Food, a basic necessity, became another challenge. At the start of a mission, every available space inside the submarine was filled with provisions. Food was stuffed into lockers between pipes, under bunks, and even inside one of the toilets, rendering it unusable until the food it stored was consumed. Despite these efforts, the quality and shelf life of food were limited by the damp, humid environment of the submarine and its inadequate refrigeration. Fresh items like bread, meat, fruits, and vegetables were brought along, but they spoiled quickly. Bread became moldy within days, developing a white, fuzzy coating that the sailors wryly dubbed rabbits due to its appearance. The initial days of relatively fresh meals quickly gave way to a monotonous and unappetizing diet of canned goods and preserved rations. One of the more notorious items in their diet was a military-issued soy-based product called Brotling's Bolver. Though intended to be nutritious and efficient, it became a symbol of the unpleasantness of submarine cuisine. Sailors mockingly referred to it as diesel food, not only because of its taste and texture, but also because of the omnipresent smell of diesel fuel aboard the vessel. This smell permeated everything: clothing, bedding, skin, and even food. Meals were consumed in shifts, often quickly and without ceremony, squeezed into moments between duties or during the rare quiet periods. Even the act of relieving oneself became complicated and often miserable. With one of the two toilets used for food storage, the entire crew, often numbering between 40 and 50 men, had to share a single functional toilet. This led to frequent problems, including clogs and accidents, and sanitation quickly deteriorated. The flushing mechanism was manual, requiring the waste to be pumped out into the ocean using a hand-operated system. During silent running operations or enemy encounters, even this became dangerous. Flushing the toilet created noise and released bubbles or debris that could be detected by enemy ships, so during such times, using the toilet was strictly forbidden. Crew members were forced to wait, often for long and uncomfortable periods. Beyond the physical discomforts, the psychological strain of life at sea was equally punishing. Submariners spent months isolated from the outside world, floating through a vast expanse of ocean with no landmarks, no land, and often no contact with other people besides those aboard the vessel. The view from the periscope or the deck rarely changed, just endless water, clouds, and the occasional glimpse of sea life. There were no trees, no hills, no buildings, nothing to suggest the world they had left behind still existed. The sameness and sensory deprivation took a heavy toll on their minds. Days became indistinguishable, and time seemed to stretch endlessly. The only real breaks in the monotony were moments of sheer terror or adrenaline, when the submarine engaged an enemy or tried to evade detection. These periods, while stressful and dangerous, were sometimes welcome simply because they disrupted the numbing routine of everyday submarine life. To maintain morale and keep boredom at bay, the crew had to invent their own distractions. There was usually a small record player aboard, and music provided a rare escape. Men played cards, told stories, or organized games, some of which were bizarre or humorous attempts to lighten the oppressive mood. On some boats, creative commanders encouraged more organized entertainment. Commander Cale Wolfgang Luth, during a 6-month patrol of the Indian Ocean, the longest U-boat patrol of the war, organized singing contests and lying competitions in which every man had to participate. Luth later remarked that these light-hearted activities helped pull his men's thoughts away from their longing for home and the weariness of their situation. They laughed, they competed, and they bonded through these shared experiences, however strange they may have seemed. As the weeks wore on and supplies dwindled, the physical appearance of the crew deteriorated noticeably. Beards grew long and ragged, uniforms became heavily soiled, and the stink of unwashed bodies filled the air. The submarine was rarely ventilated, and there were no showers. The environment was one of constant dampness, fuel vapors, and the stench of body odor. Despite efforts to stay as clean as possible under the circumstances, it was impossible to remain hygienic. By the time a U-boat returned from a patrol, the crew looked as if they had survived some great ordeal, and in truth, they had. Their gaunt faces, dirty clothing, and tired eyes told a story of endurance. Yet this very appearance, repellent to some, earned the respect of those who understood what they had endured. Fellow sailors and civilians alike recognized the hardship etched into their features. It was not just the dirt and grime that marked them. It was the silent evidence of their sacrifice, of time spent in one of the most hostile environments imaginable. Every stain and scar, every hollow look and tattered garment was a badge of survival, proof of their resilience in a war that offered them little comfort and demanded everything.